Durian ASEAN.
Monday Morning Matters.
Perspectives
from Southeast Asia.
Hey, this is Arlene and you're with Durian ASEAN. Of course, today we are going to discuss about the ASEAN Economic Community. So, is Malaysia, or to be specific, Southeast Asia as a whole, ready for the ASEAN Economic Community, which will take place at the end of 2015? With me right now is, of course, P.Ravidran. He has been working really hard in terms of pushing the AEC for Malaysia especially. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
And first of all, perhaps you can give a bit of, definition for those who never heard before. What is AEC?
Well, the ASEAN Economic Community, is actually the formation of a single market and a production place. Mm-hmm. The integration, the overall integration of ASEAN, the process started way back in 1992. When the leaders of the Southeast Asian countries or ASEAN signed the Framework Agreement for Economic Cooperation, and from then on, from 1992, several economic agreements were signed. The first one was, of course, the same year, 1992, we signed the ASEAN Trade in Goods Agreement, or what we call the CEPT Agreement. Under the agreement, we agreed to remove tariffs, basically eliminate import duties. That means basically when you trade among the 10 ASEAN countries, you can import and export products freely without any import duties or any other form of barriers. So it's actually a free movement. So we started with the trade in goods, merchandise goods in 1992. And then we said, okay, it's not just goods, but we need to look at investment and services.
Mm-hmm. So you are actually taking baby steps. This is not like out of a sudden we want to have AEC.
Contrary to what many people have in mind, when they talk about AEC 2015, they think it is something that's going to happen only on the end of 2015 or beginning of 2015.
But you already built the foundation.
We started, the whole process started way back. In fact, if you want to go much earlier, it started in 1977 when the ASEAN ministers signed the preferential trading arrangement. That was 1977. But of course, 1977 to 1992, not much progress was made. But from 1992 onwards, you find that it's a step-by-step. It's a progressive approach to building the single market. So we are coming to the end of 2015, which is now we are almost there. We are completing the first. Actually, it's the first phase in any economic integration. It's never complete. EU took 50 years.
Yeah.
So we have agreed in 2007 when we adopted the ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint that we will set ourselves a timeline to at least finish the first phase of what we intend to do. That's why we call it the AEC Blueprint 2015.
Okay.
So the implementation period started in 2008. And we'll finish by 31st December.
So when you say first phase, that is like probably the recent economic meeting, the ASEAN Economic Ministers meeting, we're talking about just trying to push the first phase out.
Yeah, we had a clear schedule of measures which we need to implement over the last 8 years from 2008 to 2015. That covers about 506 measures. Or what we call initiatives or whatever you want to call it, but it's 506 measures, and out of the 506 measures we already implemented 461. So the implementation rate of the AEC blueprint today is about 91.5% or close to 92, and we intend to achieve, of course, achieving 100% will be difficult, I must admit, and this has been clearly articulated by the Minister of International Trade and Industry over and over again, that our ambition is at least to see that we achieve 95% or 96%, above 95%. And I think that's it's commendable, because anyone who achieves 90 or 95% is a commendable achievement. If you look at university ranking, if you do a subject, if you get 95, it's A+. So I think in that sense, ASEAN has done well.
So before we dwell deeper into the AEC as what we are seeing it now, I want to go to the recent ASEAN Economic Minister meeting, because a lot of things were being discussed. Perhaps you can just give us some updates and brief us on what have been achieved or what are the challenges that have been overcome.
Well, the 47th ASEAN Economic Ministers meeting was held from the 22nd to the 25th. In fact, we just finished the meeting yesterday, and one of the ministers took a stock. It was stock take exercise. Where are we in terms of implementation? And we find that we are at 91.5%. So we have another 8.5 for close to 9% of the measures. So the ministers, I think, have decided that we should do all that's possible to push to the full implementation. I think there are a balance of 43 to 46 measures that's outstanding. So the ministers agreed that we should at least try and at least complete half of that 46, so that the percentage can be moved up.
That's amazing. But let's put some, I guess, picture on what do you mean by 95 or 91%. Is it infrastructure integration or financial integration, or in terms of you reduce the NTB?
I think the AEC is comprehensive in coverage. It covers goods, it covers services, investment, financial, transport, telecommunication, agriculture. So the 506 measures that I was referring to covers the entire spectrum of scope. It covers the entire scope, meaning that goods, services, investment, financial, transport, telecommunication, energy, minerals, agriculture. So the final,
it's almost like everything that
everything
you discuss under the roof.
Everything related to economic, right, is covered under the AEC blueprint. And as I said, this is just the first phase of our ultimate objective of forming a single integrated market where there will be complete free flow. But the complete free flow will only take place after some time. So the first thing we did was goods, services and investment, which we have done relatively very well. So it's a work in progress. So the 47th Economic Ministers meeting, we took stock, what are the outstanding issues, where there is a need for ministers to make, where there is a need for political decisions to be taken. And I think the ministers have provided guidance for the senior officials now to work on the outstanding issues over the next 4 or 5 months, so that by the time the 27th ASEAN Summit, which will be held in November in Kuala Lumpur, at least the ministers then can report to the leaders of these ASEAN countries what they have done over the last 8 years. So that's what basically the economic ministers did. And of course, non-tariff barriers is something that has been so frequently highlighted by the private sector, because they are the people actually transacting the businesses. So
that's true.
And they have been providing valuable inputs to the economic.
But these are more structural problem, right? When you talk about NTB,
non-tariff barriers is a very broad term. Non-tariff measures, we use it. Now, non-tariff measures itself is not illegal, because you need to have, for safety, for health reasons, for security reasons, you need to have some measures in place. So what the issue here is to identify you should not accord protection to your domestic industries.
I see.
To protect inefficient industries. I think to identify within a non-tariff measures, what is that measure that is actually.
But that's a bit hard, isn't it? I mean,
it's quite difficult,
especially like in Malaysia, the automobile industry is kind of protected.
No, within ASEAN we have actually liberalized.
Oh, really? Okay.
Sector. And today Malaysia, you find cars that are coming in mainly from Thailand and Indonesia duty free. So I think for ASEAN we have liberalized the automotive sector. Contrary, many people believe that we are still protecting.
Yeah.
I think that's not the case, because
the news didn't come to us.
You find that we have actually if you really look at, if you ask Thailand, they're exporting close to 50,000 to 60,000 units of cars into Malaysia.
So they are truly the hub for car manufacturing.
I won't say whether they are truly the hub,
at least for now.
we ourselves are also an auto manufacturer and an auto hub. So I think the word hub, I wouldn't want to assign the term hub to Thailand, because I think in Indonesia, under the single market we are rationalizing production. Some parts and components are made in Thailand, some are made in Malaysia, some cars are made in Malaysia, some are made in Indonesia, some are in Thailand, some are in Philippines. So it's a rationalization of production processes. So it's very difficult to say. But I would agree with you to say that ASEAN as a whole is a hub.
Yeah, that would be great. But coming to that, would it disrupt any supply chain mechanism that is in place right now? Like, will the liberalization of sectors means that the traditional supply chain, it would be like, this country produced this and then that one will produce the component, but now it's liberalized. Maybe suddenly there will be a change of
the whole idea
supply chain.
The whole idea of AEC is to promote value chain activities. So it is not otherwise. So we are promoting the entire value chain activities to take place within ASEAN. In fact, now we are part of the global production network. We find that inside
it's actually helping the value chain even better.
Yes. So it is for example, when floods took place in Thailand, the auto manufacturers were affected. The auto manufacturers affected were not only in Thailand but also in Brazil and Chile, because the parts and components were actually going from ASEAN into Brazil. So they had to stop production because of parts. So AEC, in a way, the main objective is to promote regional value chain to be part of the global production network.
So how the situation would be different? Let's say the same kind of example that you gave.
Well, the situation here today is competitive. It's price competitiveness. Today the global world, liberalization, and therefore people are looking for value for money. When you talk for value for money, then they're looking for competitive pricing, and when you talk about competitive pricing, that means your production must be competitive. So this is what the whole AEC is about. The liberalization that's taking place within ASEAN is actually to make ourselves globally competitive. The whole idea of AEC is to make sure ASEAN countries are globally competitive.
We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll talk more about ASEAN Economic Community with P.Ravidran.
Monday Morning Matters.
Perspectives
from Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene. You're with me, and of course you are with us discussing about the ASEAN Economic Community. So, I want to ask further about this topic. When it comes to ASEAN Economic Community, of course, ASEAN governments are ready. They are in discussion, and they have somehow, approved like 91% of challenges that they will be facing in terms of trying to liberalize the regional economy. But what about businesses as well as the ASEAN community?
Well, the businesses are very happy, I must say. Today, if I have to quote, we just had the meeting recently. Over the last 2-3 days, and we had the Business Council, the U.S. ASEAN Business Council, the Canadian Business Council, the ASEAN India Business Council, the East Asian Business Council, and all those private sector representatives who were present at the meeting. One thing was very clear, that they see ASEAN as a market with huge potentials. And they fully support the AEC, and they see AEC. In fact, they are asking us to accelerate the pace of integration, because they know that ASEAN has got 625 million people, and has a growing middle class population, and therefore, to my mind, ASEAN, is equally a big market, bigger than even the EU.
I see.
EU 28. So in a way, so the businesses. I want to go one step further, Irene, before you asked me that question. Last year, 2014, ASEAN attracted US $136 billion of investments. Now,
wow,
that's a huge sum of money, and we surpassed China for the second time. In terms of investment, people say investments are going into China, but if you look at the statistics today, investments were actually into ASEAN 136. I think the inflow of investment to China was slightly less.
So we are actually a huge competitor for China.
Yeah, we are a huge competitor for China, and also India. India is trying to attract investment, but if you look at the number of investment going into India and compared to what coming to ASEAN, I think ASEAN with 625 million people is certainly much more attractive. Why ASEAN is attractive? Why ASEAN? People asking, if you look at the publication, why ASEAN? ASEAN now. ASEAN matters. I think these kind of terms have been used to actually say that ASEAN is so attractive, and that's because we have agreed, the leaders have agreed to form this single market. The formation of a single market is not 10 different markets in ASEAN, it's a single huge market, and therefore the liberalization initiatives that we have put in place, the trade facilitation initiatives that we have put in place is actually benefiting the private sector. Of course, certainly, what we now are looking at is to ensure that the SMEs, the micro, small and medium enterprises within the region, because 97-98% of the enterprises, business enterprises in ASEAN are small and medium, micro, small and medium enterprises. We want to ensure that they also benefit.
But how can SME benefit from a larger market when you have to compete with a bigger brother, MNC?
This is where I say, we need foreign direct investments. We need the big companies, multinational companies to come in. They provide employment. When not all manufacturing processes are done by the multinational company, they will have to subcontract. They have vendors. We call them tier 1, tier 2. In the automotive sector, we call them tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Tier 3 is, of course, at the low end. Tier 2 and tier 1. Tier 1 means basically they will be the supplier for the just-in-time manufacturing. That means once it leaves the tier 1 supplier, it straight goes into the process of building the car or manufacturing the car. So, these big companies have been able to assist the development of micro, small and medium enterprises in the region. We need technologies, we need expertise, and therefore they bring this technology, they bring the expertise, they bring the capital, and I think this is where the ASEAN ministers, the ASEAN leaders are now saying that, we should do more for the micro, small and medium enterprises. If you look at all the ASEAN countries today, we have micro, small and medium enterprise corporation. In the case of Malaysia, we have SME Corp, a dedicated organization which is under the Ministry of International Trade.
It seems like, let's put a focus on Malaysia. It seems like Malaysia is doing well even without AEC. Do you think if you want to... do you think Malaysia will be doing even better?
I think Malaysia needs AEC.
Really?
Malaysia needs AEC.
But
we have only 30
what is
million.
The number that...
Okay, we are talking about Malaysia, population, small domestic market of 30 million compared to ASEAN 625 million. If you take in terms of percentage, we are about 4 or 5% of the size of the ASEAN market. Now, if you bring in all these foreign companies invest in Malaysia, and if they are only going to produce for domestic market, I don't think we will be competitive. Malaysia needs AEC. We need the bigger market, and this is where we are seeing today many of our micro, small and medium enterprises have actually ventured out into investing in Thailand, in Indonesia, in Cambodia, in Laos. We have presence in all the 9 markets today.
That's great. But what about the awareness of it? I think the recent report by the US Business Bureau, if I'm not mistaken, they say that the awareness is still very low for SME.
You actually got it right, Arlene. I must admit that awareness is something not something that's easy to be done. The government at least from the Ministry of International, the government, for example, I give you from last year. I think last year to July, we have undertaken over 200 AEC awareness
and it's still not enough.
It's not enough. Now we are encouraging the private sector. We are telling the private sector, and the private sector also doing their part. They are going, and I think the awareness is not just about the business sector. The awareness must start from the school.
I see.
Universities, to the ordinary people like you. If someone asks ASEAN, so what? How do I benefit? What do I gain from ASEAN?
Actually, that's the core question of every Malaysian, because until now, a lot of them are still quite I would say blur lah. Blur.
I think they're blur. You're right. I'm not going to be defensive on that. And this is what we are doing. We are now reaching out to schools, to the university students, to the youth. In fact, the youth, which form 60% of the ASEAN population, they must be aware of ASEAN, because
they are the future of ASEAN.
They are the future of ASEAN, and is in ASEAN, and there are opportunities for them. Today in Malaysia, we have so many graduates. We have 19 public universities and about more than 80 private universities, compared to 30 years ago where there were only 3 or 4 tertiary where you can go for tertiary education. But today we have so many universities, we are churning out so many graduates. Now where are they going to get their employment from? And therefore AEC is certainly is for them. What we are doing is for the youth of tomorrow.
But for the long term, do you think there's any recommendation by MITI perhaps to structuralize the awareness of AEC or ASEAN maybe in schools, as in like the education department?
Well, work is in progress. I think each and every ministry within the Malaysian structure, the government structure, there's a greater awareness of ASEAN, and they are reaching out to various stakeholders. For example, the Ministry of Education, I believe, they are also reaching out to the schools to say ASEAN. We are trying to create an identity. That ASEAN, think regional, because you can't think domestic. Malaysian is 30 million now. Where are we going to get employment from? As I said, Arlene, today I am very happy to say that because of AEC, more than 1,000 Malaysian companies are operating in the ASEAN region, and not all of them are big boys. Not all of them are in the same rank as Maybank or CIMB or Petronas or AirAsia. There are many small companies. The big boys probably make up about 10% of the 1,000 over companies that are located in ASEAN. So, as I said, Malaysia needs AEC, and many Malaysians are benefiting from it. Well, of course, if more and more people are aware of the opportunities, I believe we want to be a globally competitive trading nation. And
so back to my question, I think even my peers around my age would want to know how would AEC benefit someone like me, single, 30-year-old, ambitious young woman from Malaysia.
I'll give you a simple example. 20 years ago, if you want to travel within ASEAN, you will have to stop in one of the capitals and then take a connecting flight. Today, from Malaysia, you are connected to all the 10 ASEAN countries. The liberalization initiatives, the open skies policies have allowed the operations of low-cost carriers, and because we have this enhanced connectivity within the region, you find Malaysians going to overseas for holidays, for tourist purposes, for
so you don't need
purposes.
Visa, you just need a passport.
There's no visa, right? Except for one country which is work in progress, which we
Myanmar,
which is certainly where Malaysians do require visa, and I think work is in progress to see how we can address that issue. But today many Indonesians come to Malaysia for medical treatment. We are very competitive. We have one of the best healthcare facilities in the region or in Asia. So many of them come to it. So as an ordinary person like you, if you want to go shopping, for example, you have the choice. You can shop in Malaysia, you can shop in Bangkok, or you can shop in Jakarta, or you can go for holiday in any of these any part of Southeast Asia. We are well connected.
But what about employment? I think it's also related to economy in a sense. Do we have the liberal to find employment outside of Malaysia with maybe the same kind of qualification, or is it still not the same?
The mobility of skilled people. I think you're talking about mobility of people, and I think there are two parts to it. Mobility of unskilled and skilled. Unskilled, of course, is regulated. Even skill is regulated, but as I said, today, we have a shortage of accountants. We have a shortage of engineers. Now, where are these engineers coming from? If you look at many of the multinational companies that are operating in Malaysia, some of them are employing Thai engineers, Filipino engineers. So, there's opportunity for Malaysians. In fact, the 1,000 over companies that are operating in ASEAN, Malaysian companies, many of them are also looking to employ Malaysians, at least at the technical level and above. The CEO, the COO, the finance portfolios are actually held by Malaysians. So it's opportunity for Malaysians to work even within the ASEAN.
But what is the current challenge when it comes to labor on AEC?
Well, ASEAN is a very diverse, we have 10 countries, we are diverse, we have different levels of economic development, and also we have small and large countries. So when you talk about mobility, for example, smaller countries in Southeast Asia or ASEAN, they would say, oh look, our market is so small, we can only take in X number of people. Compared to somebody else who has a bigger market. So I think the whole concept of mobility, we want to promote mobility of skilled people, but it is freer. I won't say free, it has to be freer flow, less hassle. For example, if a Malaysian company operating in Cambodia, he needs a technician for 2 weeks. Now, if you don't have this mobility of skilled people, then the guy has to actually apply for visa, probably has to wait for 2 months before the visa is approved. And by the time, he will lose his business because he needs his technician to go and set the machine or do the production.
That's true.
So, I think mobility of skilled people is very, very critical as ASEAN.
So, you don't the future means that you don't need working visa.
Well, we are facilitating. We need to facilitate. I think business visitors, for example, we have signed the Movement of Natural Persons Agreement within ASEAN, which allows 3 categories at the moment, which is business travelers, contractual service suppliers, and of course, if you want to go for short-term employment. So it's been done. But I think more need to be done in terms of. I think we have started the process. As I said, EU.
It's phase 1.
EU has taken 50 years. Please give us more time. Time is required for economic integration.
That's true. Anyway, we'll take one short break. For the next round, we'll talk more about the future of AEC.
Monday Morning Matters.
Perspectives
From Southeast Asia.
Hey, this is Arlene. You're back again on the discussion regarding on our ASEAN Economic Community. Are we ready for it yet? So, before I dwell even deeper on the AEC, I want to know more about the TPPA and RCEP, because if AEC is supposed to be, the free trade agreement for the rest of Southeast Asian, why do we still need TPPA and RCEP? I'm talking in the context of Malaysia here.
Well, the whole concept of ASEAN Economic Community, as I mentioned, is to create a single market and global production base. So global companies have set up their operations in ASEAN, and they are producing just not for ASEAN. They need to produce for the global market. And even our SMEs, we are now telling them it's not just for ASEAN, but it's the global market. So if you look into the broader context, of course, ASEAN has now signed free trade agreements with China, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and India. So we already have a free trade agreement. In fact, ASEAN-China is the world's largest free trade agreement. Now, what we are trying to do now is to create regional comprehensive economic partnership, which is bringing all the 10 ASEAN countries and the 6 dialogue partners into a single large, and this RCP now has a combined market of almost over 3 billion, or more than 50% of the global population, and therefore, as I said, the bigger the market, the better, and therefore you need to ensure markets are open, markets are liberal. If not, for example, assuming China with 1 over billion population, if China is a closed market now, then we are not able to export.
That's true.
Of course, China can produce for its own population, but then they will still not be competitive. So I think this whole concept of RCEP is to create a globally competitive economic environment. So for me, Malaysia, if you take Malaysia itself, has signed a number of free trade agreements. The recent one was with Turkey, which came into force on August 1st. Alright, it came into force. So Malaysia, as a trading nation, we need to look at the global market, not just look at our AEC. So in that context, of course, TPP and Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement and RCP is very, very relevant to Malaysia, and I think that's the whole reason why the government is participating in this. We have to look at the global market. We just can't say, we are okay, we are fine with AEC 625 million. After some time you find that 625 million is a very small market when you look at the global market, which is over 7 billion people.
Yeah, that's true. But there are still criticism by some party that AEC, because it's being viewed as a competition in a larger pool of markets, so those who are not in the state of advantage, meaning like maybe the poor farmers or, the small mums and pups, stores or companies, they might lose out in the game and there's no protection for them.
Well, I think, Irene, these are micro, small, medium enterprises that we are going back to them. And as I said earlier on that, the governments in the region are doing all they could do to facilitate the participation of MSMEs in the regional integration program. I think many governments in the region have got programs in place. For example, in Malaysia, we have SME Corp. They have so many programs in place to assist these micro, small, medium enterprises. I think, MSME also must adopt themselves, must change with the changing global, to meet the global challenges. They have to modernize. They have to be competitive. As I say, you can accord protection is only for a short period of time. After some time, they find that they cannot sustain themselves in business. So now, just because of these companies, we can't say that we don't want to open up our market. I think we have to be competitive. And as I said, many of our MSMEs are doing very well. But you're right. Awareness again. Many people are not aware of the success of these MSMEs. And this is what we are doing now. In the Ministry of International Trade, I would say that we are reaching out to people, citing examples of how successful some of our Malaysian micro, small, medium enterprises are.
Could the low level of awareness be attributed due to ASEAN Secretariat being not well funded? Because as we all know, when it comes to ASEAN Secretariat, it's too small to manage such a huge scale of a master plan.
I think awareness is not just a function of the ASEAN Secretariat. ASEAN Secretariat has its limitation, but I think awareness is up to individual governments. For example, I'm told today in Thailand, the level of awareness is much higher than all of us, and this is what we are doing in Malaysia today.
And they have it in school as well.
Yeah, they have it in school, so this is what we are doing today. I think
so we are learning from Thailand.
I think awareness is so important. I believe once if you hit the right level of awareness, and I believe then issues like we will be not, if you open up we will be unemployed, we will lose out to foreigners, so on and so forth. It's basically because there's a lack of awareness.
And another area of concern is, as much as we want to liberalize the economies in Southeast Asia, but the reality is, except for maybe Singapore and in some stage Malaysia as well, other countries, they are still poor in terms of their connectivity. I'm talking infrastructure and network.
Well, the AEC, actually, if you really do a very detailed study on AEC today, it has benefited Cambodia, Laos and Myanmar more than even some of us. Today, if you go and ask Myanmar today, 10 years, 20 years ago, where were they? Cambodia, for example, even Laos today. Laos, because of AEC, they are now connected. Laos is the only landlocked country in the region.
Yeah.
And today they are well connected with the rest of Southeast Asia, rest of the world, including China, Japan and Korea. So the whole, I think, to say, of course we recognize there's still the level of economic development is less than some of the other ASEAN member states, and we have various programs in place. For example, we have the initiative for ASEAN integration, IAI, and this is to provide technical assistance, to provide capacity building for these countries. And then we have dialogue partners like EU, United States, Japan, who are actually providing a lot of assistance to support AEC. In fact, we welcome those support, because without which, I think, it's not that we cannot integrate, but the process will be very slow. We need to enhance the capacity, and this is what we are doing, enhancing the capacity of officials in Cambodia, Laos and Myanmar, and today they are the major beneficiaries of ASEAN.
But they still have probably like maybe 2 steps away from like the rest of the top 5.
Our objective is to bring all of us to be on par, but it's going to take us time. Right? And I think globally, even if you look at EU, there are 28 countries, and can you say that Spain is same as Portugal, or Portugal is same as some other member states? No, right? So there's different level. But I think one has to ensure in this whole process that the gap is not too wide. There will be gaps. I think we have to narrow those gaps, but we'll make sure that it doesn't widen. This is what we are doing.
Do you think AEC will spur other problems like inequality, social inequality?
No, I think again I say AEC is an inclusive we are promoting inclusive growth. We are already working on the next 10-year plan,
Wow.
which will be announced in November this year.
That will be the second phase, I suppose.
Yeah, second phase, AEC 2025. We call it AEC 2025. I don't know what the term going to be used, but I know for sure we have an economic plan for the next 10 years, 2016-2025. We have outlined so many strategic measures there, and among the strategic measures are inclusive growth. One of them is inclusive growth. We want to ensure that the gap, there's no inequality. I know if you look at our economic plan, we talk about equitable development, economic development. It's about reducing poverty, eliminating poverty. I don't think we can completely eliminate poverty, but at least reducing. And it's about reducing the gap between different member states. So in many ways, what we are doing in ASEAN, we are addressing all these issues that have been discussed, that have been debated by many.
And since you mentioned the second phase, which is the release of the next plan in November, perhaps you can also provide us just a glimpse of what Southeast Asia can expect for the next 10 years.
Well,
what kind of transformation?
My minister, the Minister of International Trade, in his opening speech at the opening ceremony of the ASEAN Economic Ministers meeting, clearly outlined that the next 10-year plan, we need to look at issues like standards, harmonization of standards. You know, if you are a manufacturer, you can't be producing product for 10 different countries, right?
That's true.
You have to have one single standard. So these are work in progress to harmonize rules and regulation, to harmonize product standards, to allow for greater mobility of people. So where the shortcomings of the existing AEC is being addressed in the next 10 years.
Oh, that's amazing.
So we have outlined our vision. We have a vision. You need to have a vision. And to work on, right? And this is exactly what we are doing. So that hopefully by 2025 or 2030, ASEAN will no longer be considered as a developing economies, but rather a developed economies. I think that's our ultimate objective.
And within that next 10 years, what would be the single biggest hurdle that you will be working on?
I think there's no single biggest hurdle, you know. A lot depends on the external environment.
I see.
You know, when you undertake economic integration, we are also open to externalities.
Like currently, there's the currency war.
But I think as the leaders and as the ministers have reiterated, we are not going to roll back or not going to, slip backwards. We are going to move forward. We are going to deepen economic integration. We will stay the course. We will move on the growth trajectory rather than moving backward. So a lot depends on external environment as well. I think one of the things I must say that Southeast Asia, if you compare to many other regions in the world, is very peaceful, is stable, and I think that's where we are getting a lot of investments.
That's really good. But before we end the show, about external factors, I know we cannot predict external factors, but is there any forecast, like you would expect, okay, maybe there will be a stronger competition between China and the US, so ASEAN should focus more on developing other areas?
Well, we are monitoring, all countries are monitoring. We have many mechanisms that we have put in place in ASEAN. We continue to monitor the external environment, and we will continue to adjust our policies accordingly. And this is where we say, although we have a 10-year plan, we have to ensure that you may have a very good plan, but because of external environment, you may not be able to execute. So you have to refine and readjust your policies. So this has been continuously done. It's like something that we will continue to do. And as I said, that today, if you look at ASEAN as a whole, we are doing very well. And I think if we continue on this economic liberalization initiative, I think one of the main issues is we have to discard the feeling of nationalism, that my market is only for my country. That kind of approach won't work. So we have to adjust our domestic policies to regional policies.
I see.
I think that's one of the biggest challenges we will face, because when you want to make changes to your domestic policies to meet the regional commitments, I know there's always there are groups, a lot of people who will say, oh, why? And I think a lot stems again awareness. So we have to create greater awareness to tell them that the region matters more.
Yeah, and to conclude, we have to be ASEAN and think ASEAN.
Well, I always say that, not only think ASEAN, you have to think global. I I think you've got to move one step. The global environment is very, very competitive. What's happening in China, what's happening in India, under the new administration in India, for example.
Modi,
they're reforming the economy, and there's a lot of opportunities. So why limit yourself to the region?
Yeah.
It's the market, the global market.
In the next 10 years, who knows? Africa will be the next emerging
many
region.
Countries in the world are engaging Africa, and South America, Central America, the Middle East. Many places. So I think don't say that. Just think AEC. Of course, we would like all of them to be aware of ASEAN, but we have to think global as well. I think we have to think regional, think global.
With that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Arlene, for inviting me to say a few words to speak on AEC. It's a pleasure to be here.